Welcome to the next video in our Maintaining a Balance series. This video will be looking at the dot point, explain how the processes of filtration and reabsorption in the mammalian nephron regulate body fluid composition. So it's an explained dot point, which means we need to look at cause and effect. So how do the processes, what is the cause of the process of filtration and reabsorption, and what effect does this have on our body fluid composition? So filtration of the blood occurs in the Bowman's capsule. So Bowman's capsule is this yellow section here. Okay, so what happens is the blood comes into the Bowman's capsule, into the glomerulus under very high pressure. And what happens is this forces all the small molecules out of the blood in the glomerulus and into the Bowman's capsule. So these molecules include water, urea, ions including sodium, potassium, chlorine, calcium and bicarbonate, as well as glucose, amino acids, and vitamins, because these molecules are all small enough to be moved into the glomerular filtrate, which is these molecules here in this yellow part, which is the Bowman's capsule. Blood cells and proteins are too large to be filtered, so they leave the kidney or leave the glomerulus via the efferent arteriole, and they continue traveling around the blood. The process of filtration is non-selective, which means many valuable components need to be recovered by reabsorption, which takes place in another section of the kidney. So reabsorption takes place selectively, so only different things will be reabsorbed depending on feedback from the body at various points along the proximal tubule. So proximal means close, so that's the tubule closest to the Bowman's capsule, the loop of Henle, which is this middle part of the nephron, and the distal tubule. Okay, so distal meaning away, further distance. Okay, so all glucose molecules, amino acids, and most vitamins are recovered, although the kidney does not regulate their concentration. So all of those substances are just reabsorbed through the proximal tubule, and the kidney doesn't really say what goes and what doesn't. It just sends all of it. The reabsorption of ions occurs at different rates depending on feedback from the body based on hormones, as I said earlier, that we'll be looking at later. In some cases, active transport is required depending on the concentrations inside and outside of the nephron. Water is reabsorbed at all parts of the tubule except the ascending loop of Henle. So to ascend means to go up. So the proximal and distal tubules and the descending loop of Henle are all involved in the reabsorption of water. The ascending loop of Henle is not. The amount of water reabsorbed depends on feedback from the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus releases the hormone depending on feedback from the body, or the hypothalamus detects the amount of water and leads to the release of hormones depending on whether we need to retain water or get rid of more water. So if no water was reabsorbed, humans would soon dehydrate, losing water at a rate of about 7.5 litres per hour. So that's how much our kidneys are working when they're functioning normally. The chemical composition of the body fluids is precisely regulated by the control of solute reabsorption from the glomerular filtrate. So secretion is the third process that contributes to urine formation. It involves the removal of toxic substances from the capillaries and the tissues. Metabolic wastes, including urea, uric acid, and ammonia, as well as hydrogen ions, are secreted into the fluid within the nephron. So when we talk about secretion, we're talking about substances moving into the nephron now from the capillaries that surround it. Okay, so we talked about reabsorption. So that's when the body reabsorbs things that we need, and secretion is when the body secretes things that it needs to get rid of. Movement of urea and ammonia is by means of diffusion, while all other tubular secretions involve active transport. Hydrogen ions and drugs are secreted into the proximal part, so that's the part closest to the Bowman's capsule of the nephron, and urea is secreted into the descending limb of the loop of Henle. So that's our descending, our downward section of the loop of Henle. So this picture here just shows, again, the nephron as a whole and those different processes that take place. So filtration takes place in the Bowman's capsule, where blood enters the glomerulus under high pressure, and our small molecules are filtered into the nephron. Then we have at our proximal convoluted tubule, we have water reabsorption and solute reabsorption, as well as the secretion of substances that we need to get rid of. As we move into the descending loop of Henle, we have water reabsorption take place, and the ascending loop of Henle, we have solute reabsorption taking place. Moving into the distal convoluted tubule, we again have water and solute reabsorption, as well as secretion taking place, and then into the collecting duct, which then carries the urine away for elimination. We have more secretion, as well as the last minute solute and water reabsorption taking place. Okay, so we'll be looking at these substances in a little bit more detail as we move on. This table just explains it again. So filtration here taking place is the movement of materials across the filtration membrane into the Bowman's capsule to form the glomerular filtrate. Reabsorption, which is the orangey section, solutes are reabsorbed across the wall of the nephron by transport processes such as active transport, and water is reabsorbed, which is our purple arrow, across the wall of the nephron by osmosis, and solutes are secreted across the wall of the nephron into the filtrate. Now, technically, these two arrows should be switched around because we reabsorb solutes the green arrow should be the other way around. Anyway, we'll fix that up later. So this table here just summarizes what the different structures of the kidney and what's taking place. So the purple relates to filtration, the pink relates to reabsorption, the blue secretion, and the red excretion. So it's just color-coded to hopefully make it a little bit easier to follow. So in the glomerulus, filtration occurs, and substances such as water, sodium chloride, potassium bicarbonate, glucose, amino acids, creatinine, and urea move out of the blood and into the nephron. So just remember that proteins and blood cells are too big to move into the filtrate, so they just simply leave the kidney via the efferent arteriole. Proximal convoluted tubule is involved in reabsorption and secretion. So substances such as potassium, sodium chloride, water, amino acids, and glucose and bicarbonate, are reabsorbed back into the blood, while substances such as uric acid, which is a nitrogenous waste, and organic acids are secreted into the nephron and removed from the body. The loop of Henle, we have the ascending and descending limbs, is where reabsorption takes place, but remember the descending limb is involved in water reabsorption, and the ascending limb is involved in salt reabsorption. So 25% of the sodium chloride is reabsorbed into the blood via the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. The distal convoluted tubule is also involved in a reabsorption and secretion, just like the proximal convoluted tubule. So sodium chloride, water are reabsorbed back into the blood, and potassium and hydrogen ions are secreted, so they move from the blood into the nephron. And lastly, the collecting duct is involved in reabsorption and excretion. So urea, salt, and some water are reabsorbed back into the blood, while water, salt, potassium, and bicarbonate ions, creatinine, and urea are transferred to the bladder and then excreted as urine. So this picture is a really nice summary of what happens at each of the places. And if you follow that shortened URL there, there's a really good video that explains this even further. So it goes for about 8 minutes, but it's a really nice summary of all the things that we've talked about and shows you exactly what moves into and out of the kidney at different places. And that brings us to the end of this video. So I suggest you go and watch this other one to further your understanding. Thank you.